Recording in progress.
Welcome into the latest episode of Betting the Pitch, the European Soccer Edition. I'm your host, real_G Warner. We are 32-11, 74%, 74.4, very close to 75, but not just there yet by a decimal point. This season, what I do is I go through whatever betting card we're discussing. Today, it is the Europa League early and late slate smashed into one. And what I do is I push them all together, my picks from the early slate, my picks from the late slate, and I turned it to 1 minute video on @thereal_G Warner on YouTube and on Instagram. Also want to tweet that I'm live because Wednesday night in my normal late night with the real_G Warner on all social media platforms. The internet failed, so not a huge fan of Spectrum, I'll put it that way. But going to go through the morning and evening card, if you will, or late evening and early evening in Europe. And try to come out with some winners on this Europa League broadcast. If you're not following me across social media, do so at the real_G Warner across YouTube, Instagram, and of course, Twitter. And then if you want to subscribe to the podcast, do so at the real_G Warner on YouTube or on Betting the Pitch on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. So it's time without any further ado. Hopefully, I see a couple people are in here already. Maybe the workday is the time to get some Europa League fix as opposed to in the wee hours of the morning. But we'll start in the Europa League, and I should pull up the permutations or exactly where we are in the knockout phase because the first leg has been completed across the board, and we are now working our way through leg 2. So a lot will be decided. Everything will be decided today, essentially. There's a lot of close matches out there, but we will see exactly where all these matches are. So let's see. Do I have the aggregate? I do. And we'll start with Bodo Glimt hosting Twente Anschada of the Dutch Eredivisie. So current number is probably where I'll start, and that is Bodo Glimt, a half of a goal favorite at home in Norway. Total is 2 3/4 and is used very heavily to over. I would be cautious about overs in this round, as I am about it on every podcast. If you listen to the Betting Pitch podcast across any social media platform, but especially when there are differences on aggregate. For example, Bodo Glimt, they got a late equalizer to draw a match at Twente. I think they scored their first shot on target. Oh, wait, they then gave up a penalty late in the match, and Twente scored it and lead 2-1 heading on the road. Big goal, of course, and changes things a lot. So Bodo Glimt, half a goal favorites right now, all the juice on Twente, and that's because I think there's a big discrepancy between these two teams. But Bodo Glimt need to win, and that kind of dictates even more about where this number will be. In terms of, I'm trying to think of better ways to describe it. I'll go to the 2 advanced number, and then we'll get in further into this matchup. Currently, Twente minus 190 to move through. So $190 will win you 100. Bodo Glimt coming back, $100 will win you 155. That is a change from, let's see. So we had initially Twente minus 125 favorite, Bodo Glimt even money. So not a huge change considering Twente took a 1-goal lead away from home, or are taking it away from home. They got it in their home stadion. But at this point, I think Bodo Glimt, I mean, still a relatively small underdog considering they're 1 goal on aggregate behind and really didn't do much on the road in Holland. But there's certainly some respect for the Twente side, as it looks like this might even fall to a quarter of a goal based on the current juice at BetOnline, Sportsbetting.ag. If you don't have an account there, have never made one, go make a first-time deposit, and you get some free money from the casino. Slide in my DMs at the real_G Warner across any social media platform, and I'll get you a fresh curated link right to gain you some access to some free casino dollars. Best way to bankrupt a casino is to use their own money against them. In terms of how this match will go, so 2-1 in the first leg was, I think, very flattering to overbettors who I think probably won on that late goal, literally at the death, last penalty. I think it was scored 96th minute, and there was 90 plus 4 added on. Let's see. So that number was Yeah, first meeting, it was Bodo Glimt to half a goal underdog, totals 2.75. So that definitely saves some people's bacon or slice it off the bone. I think from where this match will go and kind of the game plan I'm expecting, Bodo Glimt need to win. And so they cannot be as conservative as they were the last time these teams matched up. Maybe it was conservative or pragmatic because they were away from home. Maybe I think there's more truth to them just not being very successful away. And FC Twente Enschede is in a much bigger league in the Dutch Eredivisie. So I lean to the underdog away from home. Certainly that I would expect Twente, who have gone to Manchester United and played great defense earlier in the Europa League campaign, I expect they will be very, very conservative away. But that doesn't mean that they don't have enough talent, just the discrepancy between squad valuations to do something here. So I lean to FC Twente currently right now, half of a goal underdog. Also lean to under 2.75. Looks like we might get 3 before kickoff. I'll move next to Roma as I'm wearing their scarf, 1-0 on this podcast with a scarf wrapped around my neck. I just don't have a lot of Europa League gear, unfortunately. I guess I might have to change that and missed an opportunity when I attended a Leverkusen Real Betis match just a few seasons ago. Roma currently half a goal favorite to FC Porto at home in the Olympia Stadio or the Stadio Olimpico. That's the Italian version. Total is 2.25 right here, and it's juiced a little bit more to over. A lot more juice on Roma, maybe climbing to 3/4 of a goal favorite. Now, for this matchup initially, we had I was very close to backing Roma, and I'm sad I didn't because they ended up drawing away, but they closed to pick them. So I guess there wasn't a lot there. And I think now that I'm looking at it, I don't really have, besides a very early, very juiced number of Roma, I don't really have them anything better than pick them. So I guess in a 1-1 draw first leg, there wasn't much to do with the side. Certainly the total worked. If you played under, 2.5 was the best I saw. 2.25 looked like where it closed. But that's exactly what Roma needed. They needed to go away from home to Western Portugal and escape with a result. That means if they win at home, they move through. And they're favored, half a goal favorite. I would expect Roma, who've been much better at home than they were on the road in this campaign, in Europa League specifically, and also in Serie A in Italy, that this is a great situation for Roma. And Porto just haven't been as strong without Conceição now managing Milan in the Serie A. He just hasn't, or the club hasn't been the same without him this season. Defense was really problematic early in Europa League play. I think it's improved, though they got into the knockout rounds by the skin of their teeth. And then as I think payback for that, or what happens when you aren't seeded, is you get one of the worst clubs to potentially match up against, Roma, with all their success over the years. And of course, in Italy and definitely in this competition as well, as I think they were finalists under Jose Mourinho, if not winners, somewhat recently. But I think they lost to Frankfurt, if I'm not mistaken. With that said, I think Porto know that they are the weaker club. They're going to go into Roma and try to keep this as low scoring as possible. I think that is really how the new manager or third manager of the season for Roma, for Claudio Ranieri, who's really tried to stabilize Roma, who have not been able to score many goals this year. And defense was a problem, I think, because they were out trying to score so many goals to try to make up for that. Didn't work under Ivan Juric, who's not an offensive manager at all, who's now worked his way to Southampton in the Premier League, in the English Premier League. And a lot of club problems, all that sort of stuff. Maybe are past Roma at this point, but it's definitely left a mark on the season and shows you what incompetence in management can do to you. And if you need a consultant, holler at me on LinkedIn, Griffin H. Warner. But with that said, I think Porto right now, to me, I'm more interested in them going on the road and playing a low-scoring game. I don't play favorites, as anyone who listens to Betting the Pitch podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or on YouTube knows. I'm not playing favorites at all, really. So very few overs, especially I know that much to Joe Dollar's chagrin, longtime listener, Patreon subscriber. Thank you for support, Joe. I think at this point, Porto are going to go in and try to keep this as low scoring as possible, keep the 0, as it's called in most of the leagues, or keep a clean sheet if you speak English and or use English or default to English, or that's your main language. I think for that reason, I think Porto going away from home against a Roma side that are probably going to try to score a goal and then get a second and then kill the game, or maybe even at 1-0, knowing that they have extra time that they can probably win through, though it certainly wouldn't be ideal. I think I'm more interested in that than I am in the Porto side. So I'll put that on my list for the ultimate best bet possibility as Porto under 2.25 goals. And it would match what happened in the first leg, which I don't think we'll see a lot different here. Moving next to FCSB of Bucharest, or Bucharesti, I believe is part of the pronunciation or whatever it stands for, the abbreviation, against PAOK Thessaloniki. So we got abbreviations will move through in this matchup. FCSB, a current pick'em right now, a little bit more juice, couple cents higher on the PAOK side away. Totals 2.25, and the juice is split in both directions. In terms of aggregate on this one, we had FCSB take a 2-1 lead, a lot thanks to PAOK mistakes, including a red card, which or second yellow, which was absolutely insane. And the match turned from there. 1-0 PAOK turned into a 1-2 deficit going away from home, and probably is enough to get them eliminated. And especially, I think, for PAOK, who I think were an underdog moving into this competition, despite being seeded on a good performance that they had. So FCSB closed a 3/4 goal underdog on the road at PAOK. Total is 2.25 here. So same total. And I think the spread is now fully baking in exactly what PAOK need, which is a victory. Because if they draw, they are going home. In terms of where this number was initially, PAOK were initially minus 185 to advance, FCSB plus 150. That reminds me now, I need to go back over through Roma and Porto, but I'll do it after we talk about this matchup. So PAOK now plus 240 to move through, FCSB minus 300. So 1-3. $300 to win your 100, or $3 to win one if you're making smaller bets on Europa League to advance numbers, which I wouldn't really hate because a lot can happen here. But generally, I think I'd want the underdog side for all of this if you're tying up money for a couple weeks or even just a couple hours. PAOK, they are the bigger club that have had bigger names and such. But honestly, haven't really been anywhere near as good as expectations would suggest in Europa League. We're kind of struggling to advance into the knockout rounds. So I think there is some value on FCSB at home. The problem is, which I guess is not a huge problem, is FCSB does not need to win. If they are losing by a single goal, and this is coming down the stretch, though, FCSB is not going to push to try to equalize. And that's probably the biggest hang up for me if you're looking to play potentially the better side at home, is that they probably will take extra time, especially if it gets late and you don't see the desperation. I would really want to see desperation if I'm losing my bet, but FCSB doesn't really have that in their desire. So I think for me, it's probably nothing here unless FCSB move to a 1/4 goal underdog. Then you could probably have some argument that's worth looking into. But even then, you're still at big risk of any sort of situation where extra time seems like the less risky avenue and you're losing your bet, which I don't really want to sign up for. With that said, I think they're going to do the best they can, FCSB, to keep this as low scoring as possible. So another under 2.25 seems very interesting to me. Now, like I said, I need to go through the Roma and Porto to advance numbers because I just missed that on the last match we went through. So currently, FC Porto 2-1 odds, very simple, and Roma minus 260, so $260 will win you 100 to advance. And what that initially climbed to was FC Porto. They closed. There was actually very little movement at BetOnline, Sportsbetting.ag, the sister sites, plus 130. So that's increased based on Porto not winning at home. Roma was as high as minus 160, ended up closing minus 158, drop of 1.25%. So not a lot of movement there. And as probably you'd expect, Roma with home field advantage, simply needing to win or going to penalties. Certainly in penalties, you'd want a 2-1 underdog like Porto, but I don't know that's necessarily going to be interesting enough for me. For the last match in the early window, we have Galatasaray of Istanbul hosting AZ Alkmaar of the Dutch Eredivisie. Galatasaray, a 3/4 goal favorite with almost all the juice. Totals 3.25, juice more to the over. And to advance numbers, we have AZ Alkmaar minus 750 to Galatasaray plus 475. And that should be that way because Galatasaray are down 4-1 on aggregate. Really big favorite for AZ Alkmaar away from home. And certainly you could see some people getting in trouble playing that, thinking this tie is over, especially going on the road to Istanbul in a really tough crowd. But this is a huge, huge task for Galatasaray. And the interesting part about this total, so 3.25, they need 3 goals at the very minimum to advance or to even equalize or to level the aggregate score. And then you need one more goal to hit the over. So as an under player, that's a very scary thing for me because AZ Alkmaar really have no interest in scoring goals in this matchup because they have enough already. If they defend, they keep a clean sheet, they're through. They give up one, they give up two, they're through. I feel like that's the big concern is what does AZ Alkmaar do here and how do they perform against a very hungry team, I'm sure, but ultimately AZ were close to slight favorite, a quarter goal favorite at home in the first leg. Total is 2.5. So we've climbed 3/4 of a goal. Galatasaray, I think, were probably the highest scoring club that I would think of in this competition for Turkey and the Turkish Super League. But I think the big question is how quickly do Galatasaray score? We know that they have some big names, as that's what the Turkish sides have all done, especially spending a ton of money to bring in players like Roland Chaloy from Sport Club Freiburg, plus Victor Osimhen after his contract issues with Napoli, and more. I could go through them all. I think the big question, though, is can you get involved with AZ Alkmaar, 3/4 goal underdog? And they're celebrating at a 2-0 loss. So I don't think I want much to do with that. And honestly, the two advanced number is probably the most interesting thing here at -750. That is an allergy for me. So probably not something I'll be looking into even any deeper than that, I must say. So I got to give out a ultimate best bet selection from the early window to then smash against the late window. And I gotta say, there's a lot of interest for me in unders. Surprise, but Galatasaray and AZ Alkmaar are not one of those. So scratch that. I think the Twente side is interesting, but I do think away from home with the lead, you're always going to be scared that they might have one of those scenarios where they take it to extra time and try to win there rather than taking a risk when they're losing late. I don't really love that scenario. FCSB and PAOK, I mean, there's a lot less that I can trust in defenses there. So I will go with the scarf that I'm wearing in that matchup. I'll go under 2.25. Roma and Porto, or combining Roma and Porto. Porto under 2.25 goals as my first selection from the early window that will then push up against the late. So moving that late window, and if you're not subscribed to the social media platforms at the Real_G Warner on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, also at the Real_G Warner on Patreon, and want to thank my newest Patreon subscriber, T. There's a lot of T's out there, so I'm not sure who you are, but thank you for your support and thank you for coming in. Had a good influx of people, I think, after the football season ended, and we're running through college basketball. And of course, soccer slate had a really good weekend last weekend in soccer. So going to try to keep that going as well, plus this incredible best bet record on the ultimate best bet portion of the Betting the Pitch podcast. From the late window, we'll start with Ajax, and they are hosting. I got AZ on the mind. We'll start with Ajax, also in the Dutch Eredivisie, hosting Union Saint-Gilloise. Currently, Ajax a quarter goal favorite. While the juice total is 2.75. Juice more to the under. So, in terms of where this number was before when we kicked off last week, we had Union Saint-Gilloise closing a half a goal favorite. A lot of money coming in on the home team of Brussels. Total was 2.5 last week. Now it's 2.75. And that money that came in didn't do so well. Ajax with a 2-0 win on the road at Union Saint-Gilloise. USG had, I think, 2 goals annulled in the first half for offside, and then ended up losing the match 2-0. So that tells me there is some ability to score goals for Union Saint-Gilloise, but there's also some they're kind of the Brighton. I guess they used to have ties to Brighton according to that last broadcast when Ajax and Union Saint-Gilloise matched up, but the Brighton ties, I guess, are no longer there, but they are a selling club that find really good talent and move it on to places like Bayer Leverkusen with Victor Boniface and Mohamed Amoura to VfL Wolfsburg, also in the German Bundesliga. And it doesn't feel to me like Union Saint-Gilloise is as strong as they have been, but I think I'm not going to doubt them because they clearly know what they're doing. Ajax on the other side, rebuilding from formerly Champions League finalist a few years back, I think, in a loss to Tottenham Hotspur, if I'm not mistaken. But ultimately, I'm interested in this matchup because Union Saint-Gilloise are an underdog away from home. That's a little bit scary to me, but at the same time, they need 2 goals to equalize the tie or to level the tie, and Ajax are celebrating with a 1-0 victory. Now, that makes me interested in Union Saint-Gilloise. I'm hoping that we see some more Ajax money come in. because also the market being very interested in betting Union Saint-Gilloise up last weekend makes me think that, or last Thursday makes me think that there's a good chance that there is some talent and some discrepancy that the market sees, as I am trying to be, as I am a believer in the efficient market hypothesis, and money dictates where what things will happen. It's not always right, clearly, as this one, they got that wrong, but I do think that reading the currents does make a lot of sense. So I'm interested in Union Saint-Gilloise side. In terms of the total, they need 2 goals, and they're going to be fighting like heck to get them. I have Union Saint-Gilloise kind of more of an over team. So Joe Dollar, here we go. Another over interest, lean to the underdog away from home and to the over 2 3/4. In terms of the Ajax side, I mean, they had been, to me, a really strong team in Champions League, and then kind of fell off because their defense was so bad, and they sold so much of their talent to Manchester United, and that flamed out, failed, whatever you call it, under Erik ten Hag in the English Premier League. But they've not been, I thought I had a good underread on them earlier this season, and it has not really worked out. So I think that also points to the over 2 3/4. As for the 2 advanced number, Union Saint-Gilloise, 10-1 odds right now. So you can probably do that math. Ajax are currently 1-20. So pretty small chance that Union Saint-Gilloise can go away from home, overturn a 2-goal deficit and advance. And I probably agree with that. So move next to Anderlecht hosting Fenerbahce. Currently Anderlecht a pick'em right now, a little bit more juice. Totals 2 3/4. Juice all the way to under. Aggregate right now, we have Anderlecht down 3-0. So all you need to do is bet them to win a home match, and they will still go home. Problems for Fenerbahce include looking at toward the weekend, and of course going on the road. Anderlecht problems is that they're going to be pushing so much for goals, and they are certainly a weaker side that have been relying a lot on like out of the box kind of screamers, worldies, whatever you call them, golazos. And that's kind of hard to back, but it got them this far. Maybe they're satisfied here, but there are some decent names in the Anderlecht side, like Lyndon Donker on loan from Aston Villa, formerly of Wolverhampton Wanderers in the English Premier League. So like they have some names, they have some talent. And Fenerbahce have a forever overpriced nature because Jose Mourinho, the special one, is their manager. I think Anderlecht as a pick'em is, of course, of interest because they are trailing 3-0 on aggregate. Fenerbahce can lose 2-0 and still advance easily. I guess that'd be a little bit more nerve-wracking late. And lean to over 2 3/4. Another, like I was saying, leading into this podcast, I do like unders always. But on this episode, we're, I guess, looking more to the over side of things because it's not a great scenario for teams needing to overturn deficits, especially Fenerbahce. You'd expect the Jose Mourinho side to be very defensive, as that's who he's always been, but this Fenerbahce side have not been, and they have a lot of big names from across Europe, kind of on the latter stages of their career, that are still able to create, but aren't able to defend the same way. In terms of 2 advanced numbers here, we have Fenerbahce minus 5,000. So 1-50 to move through. Anderlecht only plus 1250 coming back the other way. That seems unfair, but it's what the lines say. Certainly don't think that there's a lot of value at Anderlecht there. And Fenerbahce has absolutely no value. So that's probably one of those where you look to backing Anderlecht as a pick'em. Circumstances certainly fit. A win at home, and worst case scenario, if you draw, then Anderlecht go home and you get your money back. A loss would be damning and damaging, of course, but I feel like based on the scenario of this matchup, I don't think Fenerbahce is that much better than anyone in this competition. So I certainly could see Anderlecht winning at home for pride or for their fan base, and I think the crowd will be behind them as always. Moving next to Real Sociedad, a 1-goal favorite at home to Michelin. Totals 2.5 in this matchup, and this was our loser as the ultimate best bet on last week's episode, the only loser of the week, as Bayer Leverkusen took care of things in the German Bundesliga and Real Madrid did in the Champions League. But, can't win them all, I guess. Only can win 74.4% of the time so far. Currently aggregate 2-1. Real Sociedad, I think, gave up a late goal to Michelin to hit that over. But 2 advanced numbers, Real Sociedad should be a big favorite. They are they're 1-20, whereas Michelin 10-1 odds to get through. Math is simple there, so I won't bore anyone with those details. But to me, this is the big thing. And And I do have some comments. Big Protein, thanks for coming in. Recent YouTube subscriber, and I will get to that in a second. I'll circle around and hit all the other comments. Throw something in here if you'd like. Here's a couple. What's up? And then I'll make sure to come back to that in 1 second. Thank you, those of you that are joining live. Comments are more than appreciated, especially if you really like my outfit. I think from a Real Sociedad Michelin game, to get back there, don't really see any value in a Michelin small Danish side going to the Reale Arena, which was my first European soccer match I ever attended. It's going to be filled. It's going to be loud. Real Sociedad care a lot about soccer. I mean, the Basque Country does. That's pretty much what they do, besides all these other sports I've never heard of. That they seem to care and parade people out when they win in front of everyone in the crowd, usually in Bilbao, but in San Sebastian, I think, as well. Real Sociedad, as a big favorite at home, that's something I usually like to be against because I don't really trust them to score goals, but that certainly plays into an under here. Especially after seeing the last week's match go over the total. I don't expect that to happen back-to-back. Real Sociedad are great for unders. I feel like they're going to control the game. That's really what they want, what they need to do. They're ahead on aggregate right now, 2-1. Certainly, Michelin are going to have to push forward, but I expect them to defend as long as possible until they really have to push out. If Real Sociedad score an early goal, then we have some problems. The Michelin must come out, and that means Real Sociedad will probably control the match, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to score very easily. But Michelin will be so gassed trying to press the ball that's my biggest concern. With that said, I think a Michelin early goal then really fires up Real Sociedad to get an equalizer to then move through on a 1-1 draw. Certainly we put some risk toward the under as we might see more goals come, especially if Michelin can get to 2. But I think there's, to me, and of course that does come up where Michelin is 1 goal behind, 2-1 down on aggregate, that they are sending everything forward late. And that might be a problem, but I do think that Real Sociedad are going to control the ball as they always do, and they're going to really struggle to score goals as they always do. And I think last time we wore this scarf, we went under Real Sociedad in a ultimate best bet on this Europa League episode, and that hit with Pauk involved. And I don't really see things changing too much there. Last but not least, and then we'll get to the ultimate best bet, and I'll run through the comments. Again, thank you, Big Protein, for throwing him in there. One of the best handles I've seen on YouTube. Victoria Plzeň of Czechia. They are hosting Ferencváros of Budapest in Hungary. Currently, Victoria Plzeň, a 3/4 goal favorite with all the juice. Total is 2.5. Juice almost all the way to over. And on aggregate here, we have Victoria Plzeň down 1-0 after a very tight early goal from Ferencváros. And then Victoria Plzeň really didn't do much to score or really threaten, I got to say, especially as a holder of Victoria Plzeň in a Champions League, Europa League combo pool that I'm in, which I think I'm probably dead because RB Leipzig and Young Boys were so bad. But, happens, I guess, to the best or worst of us. I think Victoria Plzeň here, so they clearly need to win. And I've been impressed by Victoria Plzeň. I followed them a lot last season in the Conference League, and then their climb to the Europa League this season. It hasn't been great for them, but they've been very competitive, including stealing a late draw on the road at Eintracht Frankfurt, I believe, to start Europa League play. We're very competitive with Athletic Club Bilbao in Bilbao to end Europa League play as well. But different story here. And Ferencváros, to me, they've always been a really defensive side, but have changed managers and are not the deep-sitting team that they had been in the past, and that's worked out for them. Clearly, they have 1-0 aggregate advantage. I do think they'll play pretty defensively away at Victoria Plzeň. Yeah, and I do think that there is a good chance that we don't see a lot of goal mouth action in this one. So I think I'm more interested in the under 2.5. We could see Victoria Plzeň move to a 1-goal favorite, which would, I think, make Ferencváros more interesting to me, because then you are pushing on a match going extra time as opposed to losing half your bet at the current 3/4 of a goal. And we have all the juice right now on Victoria Plzeň with plus getting odds on the Ferencváros side. So I'm interested, I think, in Ferencváros as both an underdog and under. But for now, I'll go with FTC under 2.5 as my biggest interest in that one. 2 advanced numbers, Ferencváros minus 125 to Victoria Plzeň minus 105. So surprising to see a team going on the road still favored a lot because of that 1-goal advantage. In terms of where this was previously, I feel like that'd be worth shouting out. We had initially Victoria Plzenia, they had caught a lot of money. They were minus 140 when I first tracked it to minus 150, up 6 2/3%, and then all the way up to minus 180, which was about 17% higher than the initial. Or actually even more than that. Yeah. So that would be, let's see, even higher than that. So that'd be 22% higher than the initial. So clearly Victoria Plzenia had been of interest. Ferencváros had climbed from plus 115 to plus 150. So 1.5 to 1 odds. They're now they're favored a lot because they were ahead. And I think a lot because Ferencváros looked better and really didn't concede many chances of Victoria Plzenia. I think that all kind of correlates to this one being a low-scoring match, and that Victoria Plzenia might not have enough in the bag to win this match by 2 goals. And certainly I would doubt that would be the case, especially in a really tight matchup. They didn't really show much in the first leg. Things change when they go home, of course. But I'm very interested in the underdog here and the under as my biggest interest in that matchup. So it's now time to get to the ultimate best bet. I do have some people to shout out, new YouTube subscribers as well, plus the comments that have come in here. Now we're getting even more comments. Okay. Audrey asks. I don't know what you mean by that, Big Protein, but want to thank Paul Padia for coming in and telling me my Champions League episode was too long, but great on the picks though. Thank you very much. And then of course, Cade Morgan for tailing. Thank you for coming in. Comments on YouTube plus new YouTube subscribers. Appreciate all of you. And of course, the Big Protein drive joining us live. I don't know what you mean by never mind. Audrey asked, but I don't know if there's a way for me to load all these comments at once. So we'll go in order. Big Protein, what's up? Big Protein, can Pau come back? I think that's what you meant. I like real tie, no bet. Yeah, so that's Pau as a pick'em. And honestly, Pau looked like a better side until he took a red card in the first leg. I don't dislike that idea, but I do think going away from home with no insurance, that's a big concern. Now we have Nevermind Audrey Ass. And then did you go over Porto Roma? I did. That's in the early part of the show. Rewind if you can, Big Protein, or wait, and I will be putting out a full version of this episode across Apple Podcasts, Spotify, under the Betting the Pitch, and of course on YouTube where you are subscribed. And then I guess it's time for the ultimate best bet. Before we get into it, want to also shout out that I have a college basketball episode coming out with Big East Ben on pregame.com podcast network. That is the Need for Seeds College Basketball podcast. They'll be out Friday for the Saturday card, so stay tuned for that. And then it's probably time for me to get into ultimate best bet. Might as well queue up my phone, which is probably going to die. 8%. I think we can make that work. I didn't give out my late night, or in Europe at least, or late play in the Europa League, but I will give that, of course, as part of the end of this show. So let's do it. Hey, this is Real_G Warner on Instagram, Patreon, Twitter, and on YouTube. This is the ultimate best bet. We are 32-11, 74.4% so far this season. I take my favorite pick across the podcast episode. Today is the Europa League. I went through the early window, the late window, every match, all the 2 advanced numbers. And here is where I'm going on this week's episode. We're going with FC Porto. They're on the road at Roma, as I wear the Roma scarf, under 2.25 in the early window. In the late window, I like Real Sociedad and Michelin under 2.5 goals. But for the ultimate best bet on this episode, 74%, 32-11 year to date. I'm going to go with that Real Sociedad Michelin under 2.5 goals. I think we've seen it at the Rally Arena. Sociedad are going to control the game, control as a 1-goal favorite. And Michelin are going to really struggle to have a lot of attempts on goal. I think we see our Real Sociedad control the ball, run out the clock, and advance in a under fashion. And that'll do it for this episode. Thank you all for tuning in. Hope you all have a great rest of your Thursday. And we'll see if I can stay on normal track to get this viewed more with everyone going to work in the mornings. But that is up to Spectrum, not going out for 4 hours in the late night like they did last night. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you all on the next episode of Need for Seeds College Basketball Podcast coming out on Friday, and of course a soccer episode that same night.
Recording stopped.